Making miracles, create new realities for your life and our world. Welcome to my video blog, where every month I address a different piece of the journey of self-actualization as it relates to the month we're in. And I like to fit the message with the season because the cycles of nature just so beautifully portray the whole archetypal dance between light and dark, and life and death, and yin and yang, and all together create a template for the whole of human experience, with each season lending itself to a different kind of spiritual work and personal growth. Now, as fall deepens in October and light fades, nature really is showing us her dying season. In areas where seasons are dramatically distinct, nature really goes out with flashing glory before winter gives the landscape a rest. Now, we humans are a bit more likely to go out kicking and screaming, and many of us fear terrible, painful, or lingering deaths over which we'll have no control. But the more acquainted I become with people at the end of their lives, the more I've noticed that we really tend to die in a similar fashion as we've lived, very much in accordance with our temperament and much more in control of the process than we think. In fact, I've come to believe that that time leading up to death, far from being just the necessary end to life, is actually profoundly meaningful, and a time when we may be resolving and completing some of the deepest lessons of our lives. Even those deaths that may look like random, cruel blows of fate and unbefitting the dignity of a person's earlier years can hold unexpected gifts and perhaps hidden purposes. Alzheimer's, for example, is one of the so-called tragic endings many of us fear. And I know of a man whose father developed Alzheimer's shortly into retirement after a whole lifetime of hard work. He supported 5 children and devoted himself to a company that didn't reciprocate his loyalty, in fact wound up firing him when he was nearing retirement age and had been used up. And Alzheimer's just seemed like such a sad finish to the life he'd lived and to the person he'd been. It actually wasn't long before his middle-aged son had to care for him like a child. And during these years of his illness, the son spent many days taking his father along with him wherever he went. And he said it was the first time he'd ever felt close to his father. Once he even took him along to his own weekly therapy session and was amazed by his father's sudden and unusual moment of lucidity. When asked by the counselor if he understood why he'd been invited to the session, he responded, "To show my son that I love him." And then he lapsed back into forgetfulness. So here was a man who'd never been affectionate or emotionally demonstrative, who devoted himself to what he thought were his duties, working hard for his family, working hard for his company. Maybe Alzheimer's enabled him finally to set down that role of provider and worker and allow some softness into his life that he may never have been able to accept in his right mind. And perhaps in the end, this was his perfect retirement. You know, one of the most fearsome aspects of dying is its capacity to plunge us into unbearable pain or disability. And I had a close friend who died in her 30s from a lifelong degenerative disease. And she feared death for much of her life because the course of her illness generally left people progressively more disabled and in pain. And for years, many years, she secretly held a suicide plan for taking her own life before she became too disabled to do so. But she never resorted to it, even though her disease did progress as expected. Somewhere along the way, she just stopped fighting the pain. Instead of trying to control death from a place of fear, she just allowed its mystery to unfold, trusting herself, trusting the process of life. And toward the end, she had many experiences of leaving her body and meeting with angels who gave her encouragement and instruction. She also had many deepening experiences of love with the people in her life. And she found that in spite of growing pain and physical disability, she loved life more with every passing day. And she once reflected in horror that her fear of the unknown had almost compelled her to end her life prematurely, cutting short this last, richest time of all. And she called me once in the middle of the night, which was highly unusual for her, and said with much excitement that her increasing shortness of breath, which initially had frightened her, that it was starting to feel like the beginning of being born. She said she felt like she just needed to push a little harder and she'd be out. And she even imagined her favorite uncle, who'd passed away 6 months earlier, waiting on the other side, ready to catch her as she popped out. Now, the very next day, after enjoying her favorite meal of chocolate donuts with her friends, she easily, quietly passed away. So if death is something that you think about reluctantly and only with foreboding, consider going into this time of year, the dying season, with more deliberation. Decide to become the creator of your death, not its victim. And here's a little exercise to help you start with that. Write a story about yourself as a very old person nearing the end of your life. And write this story as someone who's experienced a deeply fulfilling life. And as you look back, you see how even the failures and disappointments had a purpose. They all taught you something you needed to know for your next step. And now you have the perspective of an older, wiser person, and you can acknowledge your accomplishments, accepting that maybe they didn't all match your hopes and plans and expectations along the way. And you feel great warmth and gratitude for the love you shared with people. And now that many of your loved ones have died, you look forward to making the transition they've already made. Picture yourself as healthy and vital, even at an advanced age. And your life is filled with love and meaning and serenity. Describe what you do in a day, what you think about, what gives you pleasure. And continue this story right up to the event of your death, and picture that transition exactly as you'd like it to be. See who's there with you, where you are, what the cause of death is, and what the final moment of letting go is like. Describe that experience of releasing your physical body to just a wonderful sense of freedom and joy. And finally, describe how the people who love you celebrate your passing, and just imagine all the details of your funeral or memorial and see it as a joyous event. So don't wait passively for death to swoop down on you like some fearsome predator. Instead, choose to go out with the flourish and easy letting go of a fall leaf. And start now by expecting and creating nothing less than the perfect finish to your well-lived life. As always, I'd love to hear your comments, and you can write to me at lynn@lynnwoodland.com. I'll respond. Now on my website, lynnwoodland.com, you can find all kinds of free downloads and recorded meditations. There's a place where you can leave a request for free distance healing and a number of other resources. For a deeper dive into this kind of work, check out my year-long Miracles course, which is a comprehensive program of online materials and live webinars, one-to-one coaching, all about living a miraculous life. So until next month, namaste. Hi, I'm Lynn Woodland, author of Making Miracles, Create New Realities for Your Life and Our World. Welcome to my video blog, where every month I address a different piece of the journey of self-actualization as it relates to the month we're in. And I like to fit the message with the season, because the cycles of nature just so perfectly portray the whole dance between light and dark, life and death, yin and yang, and all together create a template for the whole of human experience, with each season lending itself to a different kind of spiritual work and personal growth. So here we are in November, that wonderful time of year when, after the harvest, food is so abundant, and in many parts of the world, a whole string of holiday traditions begin a season of eating. Raiding the kids' trick-or-treat candy, a string of holiday parties, yearly family gatherings, all the homemade cookies that show up at the office, and so on. And for so many of us who we may already be kind of overfed and diet conscious, this season of food can be a time of losing our tenuous hold on sensible eating habits, and it might be a time when we just find ourselves surrendering completely to weeks of uncontrolled feasting on rich and sentimental comfort foods. But Mom only makes this once a year, we tell ourselves, or it's only for the holidays. And then January comes and we wonder how that extra 10 pounds got there. So if you found that a little bit of cheating on sensible eating morphs into a month-long binge for you at holiday time, consider a whole different approach, an alternative to deprivation or binging that involves neither guilt nor denial, one that actually results in more eating pleasure, much more so than simply eating everything in sight. The secret has to do with replacing quantity with quality, and autopilot eating habits with an extra measure of attentiveness. Conscious eating is all about waking up our taste buds to every sensory delight so that we don't miss even a second's worth of enjoyment by simply falling into unconscious eating habits. And it enables us to enjoy our food more while requiring less to feel satisfied. Binging happens when we stop paying attention. We may enjoy that first bite, but then we keep eating to recapture that first moment's gratification even after the food is no longer delivering it. And we may eat for reasons other than hunger. We may eat to fill an emotional void or to stuff painful feelings. Binging also happens when we've developed such a long-term habit of restrictive dieting that just a taste of something not on our food plan sends us into an out-of-control eating frenzy where we just consume enough to hold us through the long drought of deprivation that invariably follows cheating. So this holiday plan involves putting down the whip of guilt and discipline and easing up on food restrictions, while simultaneously paying more attention to the whole experience of appetite and craving and satisfaction. It involves eating exactly what you want, exactly when you want, and looking at all foods as being equally good. Now, this isn't permission to binge. Rather, it's a challenge to go out of your way to feed yourself exactly what you really want, even when eating what's readily available would be easier. This is about treating yourself to what will give the greatest possible eating pleasure, instead of treating yourself with whatever great quantities of sugar and fat happen to cross your path. Now, I admit this approach is not for everyone, and please don't substitute my suggestions for your doctor's counsel. But if it's appealing to you at all, consider devoting the holiday season to making every eating experience a conscious one. That means eliminating as many distractions as possible, like TV and reading materials and eating on the run. Just eliminating all of those in order to savor every bite.